Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's topic is leadership, and actually leadership very early on in your career. I'm having a discussion with Sharmi, who's a medical student, but alongside that she works as a strategy consultant, and she actually teaches leadership as well. In this episode, she tells me about her diverse roles and experiences. We talk about the importance of understanding leadership theory, and she shares her tips on how to get leadership experiences, and that includes the need to capture achievements as you go along and to look for opportunities to do so. We discuss the importance of networking and of knowing how to pitch yourself, especially since many career opportunities are not found on jobs websites, but are instead created by you. Welcome, Sharmi. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Matt. So I'm Sharmi. I study clinical medicine at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. I also work as a medical admissions strategy consultant at Crimson Education. Also clinical programs executive at Megs Academy and content curriculum director at the Healthcare Leadership Academy.
Wow. Okay. So where do we start with that? Let's start with how you got sort of into all of those things, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. So you started off with clinical medicine. So how did you go from medicine into doing all of these high level leadership roles?
The great thing about the program at Maastricht University is that you do obviously your first 3 years of Bachelor of Medicine. So it's very much theoretical based. But the last 3 years is actually very much internship based. So you do a lot of clinical work, which is basically on internship basis. So pretty much you're holding your own clinics. You're already kind of working and engaging with the healthcare team. You're already quite a part of the healthcare team, sorry. So you do you're known as a co-assistant. So you're almost like a student doctor at this stage. But because obviously the whole last 3 years is internship based, so I could do internships in surgery in the Netherlands, or I could go abroad for it. So it gave me scope to travel and gives that flexibility because
Okay.
it's much more based on competencies, and we use the CAN-MED system in the Netherlands. So as long as you're competent enough to reach a particular skill level, your registrar will sign you off, etc. And it's done in this progression. And obviously you do your full progress tests every year, and that assesses your clinical knowledge, etc., to progress into the next stage. So the reason why I've been able to do a lot of these roles is because a lot of the roles that I'm in also are remote. So I also am able to conduct a lot of this work remotely. So this means and relates to a lot of the educational admissions consultancy that I ride for medicine.
Yeah.
So again, remote work that's flexible, and it fits in with my schedule and able to earn a really good salary alongside clinical commitments.
Yeah. But how did you? Because are you practicing clinically?
I'm not qualified yet, so I have to obviously finish my clerkships first.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. So oh my, that's even more impressive. That okay. That's even more impressive. So okay. So how did you? What made you decide then to what made you decide to do all of this stuff alongside your studies? Because normally like you're studying, you're learning. It's an incredibly busy time, and you're doing all of this stuff. I mean, so you like, do you sleep?
So I actually come from an extremely medical family. So my father's a general practitioner, former ENT. He was actually mentored from Dame Kumar from Kumar and Clark's Clinical Medicine
Oh,
at Barts in
yeah,
London.
yeah.
My brother's a plastic surgeon from Newcastle, is now just finished his UCL master in plastic surgery. And my other brother is internal medical registrar as well. So I actually come from a huge medical family. The issue that I found is that my family, once you become too clinical and you go down that avenue, there is very little time for you to diversify.
Okay.
And that means taking time out of training. And that causes a lot of stress because you are trying to balance these big commitments. It's better to diversify before you qualify so
Okay.
that you have these opportunities available to you when you want them at a much higher level.
Yeah.
So, for example, obviously, once I finish my clinical training, I'll be much more in a better position to go for some really good jobs that I do want to go for
Yeah.
later on, which align with my career goals.
Yeah.
So, I actually want to go into orthopedic surgery. So, this relates to my whole narrative. So, you need to be able to kind of be good at your leadership skills. So, I'm working for obviously clinical for Megs Academy, so as a clinical programs executive. So, this really enabled me to understand a bit more how leadership is taught to clinicians. So having that kind of educational STEM and also having that clinical STEM is useful. So understanding how do clinicians learn, what is working with well for them in kind of a remote setting, etc., and really understanding their kind of difficulties and the things that they learn best with. It's very much in line with just-in-time learning. So leadership is very difficult to kind of acquire those skills in your clinical career. Like sometimes you're not necessarily going to be given opportunities, especially at a junior level. It comes with experience, it comes with time, and especially in UK training, where a lot of there is a lot of time spent where you are just doing a lot of service delivery, and sometimes your career kind of things that you do and do are sometimes secondary. So I wanted to make sure I had a lot of the skills that I could gain before while I was doing it, so that when I do come in a position where I may not have as much time as a surgical registrar to be able to do some of these things that I'm doing now, but I got to experience some certain things that I do want to do in my life. When you have to dedicate a lot of time to training as well, and sometimes I didn't want to compromise on those aspects in my life, so that's why I wanted to do certain things beforehand, diversify, so that I do have the skill set to go for other jobs and the different things I do want to do with my clinical career. So there's other things that there's a lot of entrepreneurship kind of projects I'd like to do after I become finish my core training, etc., and obviously it relates to orthopedics as well. So really making sure that I lean into the right skill set so I'm ready for the big stuff when I do finish.
I have to say, I think it's incredible that it's incredible how you kind of you're planning ahead. There's a career path. There's a very very clear career direction. So you're studying medicine, and you've got. So tell me about the leadership. What kind of leadership are you doing in these roles?
So it's very much kind of educating the subject of leadership, so understanding a bit more what are the traits of a good leader, how to apply your leadership knowledge into different contexts, providing kind of skill development and understanding the behaviours required, so that when they are put in a position in like a board situation, they know how a board operates, what are the norms, what are the things that you could improve on, how to use your prior knowledge and then build upon that. Obviously, Maastricht University is one of the pioneers of problem-based learning, so I am very much a huge advocate of applied learning and understanding how to consolidate your prior knowledge and build upon that. That's something that I'm hugely passionate about, and something that actually I didn't realize how useful it was until you get into the working world and realize that actually a lot of the work that you do non-clinically is also very much problem-based, because you're solving problems all the time. And it was very interesting to kind of transfer a lot of the clinical knowledge, skills that I had. So naturally problem solving, naturally, finding what possible solutions could be. Because in essence, for me, medicine's pretty much a problem solving skill. Once you know what the problem is, you can find what the solution is. And that goes for a lot of non-clinical things. And I really wanted to kind of make sure doctors knew and healthcare professionals knew that there were other careers outside of medicine, and that you didn't have to pigeon yourself into clinical medicine alone. And I really am passionate about that, because actually I saw how certain people in my life actually struggle to get into non-clinical roles because they pigeonhole themselves clinically too soon. So that meant that it was difficult to get them onto a skill level that they needed to be for the positions that they wanted. And choice is always a good thing. Having choice is always a good thing, and I never shy away from that. I like to have choices in life, and if anything was to happen to me that, for example, I couldn't operate or I couldn't really practice the specialty that I wanted to, I had other options in my life that I still added value to this world.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of think for us as doctors, or maybe healthcare professionals in general, where do we normally learn leadership skills?
Leadership skills is normally kind of cultivated right at the start of medical school. So you're already working in groups, you're already having these projects at your medical school. Then you're slowly moving into the clinical space. You'll be part of the healthcare team, so you're going to engage in a lot more leadership roles in that respect, where you're given a bit more leverage to make decisions. And I think that's when a lot of students find that they have that leadership potential but don't know how to nurture it, and it's difficult to kind of develop develop those skills if you're not given practical examples or you've not been taught it formally, just through experience. And also that experience can be very varied. So having some kind of like level playing field of understanding, well, what does a leader do? How does leadership work in different ways? So there's obviously back end leadership. There's obviously like where you're innovative leadership. You're doing leadership in different ways. Leadership as a follower as well. So sometimes you're using followership as a form of leadership. So it's understanding that this is not something that is, it's not just the theory that you need to know, it's also the practical application. But because medical students, doctors, healthcare professionals are so theory based, I think they always want to understand, well, what is the reason behind everything? What is the underlying cause of all this? So understanding how to develop those skills is important. I know in my medical school, obviously the CAN meds is hugely important. So you need to be the doctor as a leader is one of my competencies. And I was also demonstrating that, especially if you are in interview situations for potential jobs or roles, and even kind of leadership roles within medicine. So whether you're on like committee, university committee, even a clinical committee where you're amongst lots of very very highly talented surgeons or doctors in your chosen specialty, you still need to be able to execute good leadership, because that's where it can really make or break your career in some cases. And the biggest thing I've learned in leadership as part of it as a subject is how important networking is. And networking is not really taught at medical school, and people don't really know what it is. They always think it's something to do with finance or business, but actually it's very much in line with what medicine is like. Actually, you need to know the right people to kind of sponsor you for certain roles, advocate for you for certain things, and that's where you can get the opportunities. And being able to recognize opportunities for other people is also hugely important. So for example, if I have a colleague that I know is fit for a role, I can endorse this colleague of mine for a potential role. It's not necessarily something that I would have gone for, but I know my colleague would be good for it. And these referrals also act as a way of networking, because you're providing value for somebody, and they will in turn at some point in your life also give that value back. And that, I think, is how I network. But networking, the leadership in networking is super important, because you're leading the way in terms of recognizing opportunity. And it's quite a broad kind of definition of what leadership is. It's not just making decisions, it's also understanding and kind of being accountable for others. And that relates to mentorship and coaching. And mentorship can also work in two ways. You can have peer-to-peer mentorship, or sometimes your more senior mentor wants to seek mentorship from you. Everyone's got different experiences and things that you can relate to. So knowing when to impart that kind of knowledge and that advice in a way that's appropriate for that given individual. But I always see everything as a learning experience, and making sure that it fits my narrative. So everything I do relates to my overall goal. So a lot of the work that I've done in startups. So there's also another theme that I have for startups, for example. So that helped me in my overall career goals. But this, going back to leadership, I really feel that leadership in itself is more about others as much as it is about yourself. It's knowing like how to handle that accountability. And that's something that I've definitely learned over the years, is being accountable for other people and being accountable for yourself is a form of leadership. I also feel that I think people I think a lot of people see things as a bit of a tick box exercise, and medicine is naturally structured like that, which is unfortunate. But I think leadership helps you realize that you've got a social responsibility for other people as well. So for their careers, and that gives a more human element to what I think a lot of people go into medicine for, is to make sure that you're looking after others just as much as you're looking after yourself.
So I'm interested in exploring sort of three things. So you've talked about the if you think how we as doctors develop leadership. So there's the theory of leadership, then there's the practice and applying, and then there's the networking. And I want to try and unpick each one of those three things.
Sure.
A little bit. Let's kind of start with the theory of leadership, because if I think most of the students that I know, they get very, very little theory of leadership, and I'm with you. I think the theory of leadership is really, really important. Practice, it's all important, but I think a lot of the time people assume they're just going to turn up and it'll just mysteriously happen and they'll be a great leader. Yeah, people make that assumptions. I don't need to read a book. I don't need to go on a course. I don't need to do CPD. Let alone sort of a master's degree or sort of or something like that. Yeah, but people just say, oh, I just it'll be fine, and they don't do the theory. So I'm guessing that you would agree with me that understanding
Yeah.
the theory of leadership is really important. But where do we learn that theory? Because the curriculum is so busy and so full. And if you said to people, I want to do half a day a week for 3 years of leadership development, I mean, there's no space for that.
But
So
again, it's this is where I think you need some structure to your leadership development, but I think it needs to be with intention. So you need to have a purpose and learning objectives for your leadership training. You also need to know how it relates to you as an individual. So it's very personalized as well. So at the same time, it may be leadership to you, maybe being good at your clinical job. For others, it may be how do I become a startup founder? So there's different aspects and prisms of leadership that people go for. It's very important to go with what your goals are for what you want to do with leadership.
yeah.
So it's once you've ascertained that, you can then kind of go into, well, what type of what program would suit me, what kind of mentorship would suit me to build upon those goals. But having goals is important because you need to understand what your goal is, so you can work backwards to find out what steps you need to gain that goal. Attain that goal. So the theory of leadership is important. The reason why is that it will help you understand people better. And obviously we have those patient consultations, etc. And there is a much more underpinning kind of social science behind it. Well, how do groups kind of work under different types of leadership? Are you emotionally aware of your behaviors? Are you emotionally aware of the way the way you perceive the world, and how do others perceive it? Because at the end of the day, if you are going to go into a leadership role, to be obviously get that leadership role again, you need to be good at your roles so you can get promoted again or go into the next step. But this is where others perceive you is also just as important as as the way you're working. So if your group or your people that are reporting to you don't see you as a good leader, how are you going to nurture that to become a better leader so that you can manage your team better, manage other people better, different departments better? And people with good leadership skills have good people skills.
Yeah.
So you need to you need to be able to engage with people that you're speaking to, and there's a whole kind of philosophy, a whole theory side of it, which I think is very crucial for doctors in leadership, because they need to understand that before they can really start applying that knowledge. Very similar to the way that they would have learned medicine, but at the same time, I still think it's something that needs to be grounded in theory first before you can really apply it, because it may work anecdotally on one situation, but it may not be repeat success in those situations. So understanding and evaluating your own leadership experiences and being able to kind of develop that is hugely important.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a great amount of sadness that we don't teach leadership formally. Yeah, it's sort of it's some of it is very individual, but all of us need to understand groups. All of us need to understand emotional intelligence. All of us would benefit from having some basic coaching skills. So irrespective of whether you want to be a founder or a chief exec or a medical director, or whether you want to be the pioneer of robotic surgery, irrespective of that, you need to understand people. You need to be able to motivate others. You need to be able to influence and inspire others, don't you? Yeah.
But the problem with medicine is that medicine is the whole reason we have medicine as a subject is it was to produce clinical doctors. It was never supposed to pioneer leadership necessarily. So I think as long as that's the output, that's why we don't necessarily have time in the curriculum to develop that. So it's very much an additional thing. And I wonder when medicine will really recognize leadership as a crucial skill in careers. But I think it only becomes more of a problem when you finish medical school and you want to go into these roles and you don't have the skill set to be able to demonstrate the skills that you already know, like inherently that you would be good at. But it's that experience that I think is important if you want to go into these roles. This can be demonstrated in so many ways, but being aware of it and making sure that you exemplify them, especially for competency-based interviews for roles, etc., etc. And even in your own clinical practice, being a good leader is also very important, because it is where you're going to make your life easier and others easier as well, even on a very kind of day-to-day basis.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. Yeah, and certainly if I kind of think at the senior level, that there's not a pipeline of people that are wanting and qualified to do the senior roles, yeah, and I think that's kind of, certainly in UK setting, I think it's a problem. Could there are not thousands of people out there qualified and willing to be medical directors, for example. Yeah, being a medical director is really, really important role, and there are not thousands of people applying for every heads of service role, and yet if you think if this was the business context, there'd be lots and lots of people wanting to climb the ladder, but sort of that doesn't happen. So for me, I think it is a problem. Sort of likewise again, in the UK context, I think GMC very recognizes leadership as something that's important at undergraduate level, and I think I would agree with you that for me, I wish this was taught more formally. But let's go on, yeah.
I think even consultants are expected to lead because they're accountable for their entire team. And I think it's something that it becomes imposed upon you, not something necessarily a lot of consultants may be ready for, especially if they've done all the loopholes, especially in surgery where you've had to do multiple masters, multiple PG certs, having to do extra things outside of your clinical time if you've not got the right, the right experience to get into the next stage. Even getting a training number is also very difficult. But in the Netherlands, it's even more. I mean, you can't even apply for surgery unless you've got a PhD, and many consultants now will do a PhD because that's probably the only way they'll be deemed by the medical community to be fit to become to become a consultant. So it's changing now.
Yeah. Let's move on sort of to the practice, because you talked about the roles that people have, and I think you're practicing a phenomenal amount of leadership, way more than most people at your career stage would be. But sort of if you think, if you look at other people that are your career stage and they say, where do I practice? Where do I apply the leadership? Forget the theory, but where do I practice? Yeah. Where do I apply it? What tips would you give to people?
So for senior medical students and doctors that are about to qualify or just finish their first year training, it's really important to go for roles that fit around your clinical time, and really consider your non-clinical work as actually a proper role. And I think being serious about it is also very important. I find a lot of clinicians and a lot of doctors, a lot of healthcare professionals see as non-clinical work as less than, and it's not. It is a different skill set that perhaps you're not accustomed to. So taking roles outside of clinical practice is also super important. To apply for these roles, a lot of the roles these days are remote, so you can kind of practice certain, for example, consultancy. Being able to develop your skills in this field will help you build your profile, and then you can apply for better roles later date. Nothing is set in stone. You don't have to do everything for forever. You can do it for a limited time, but it's important to gain that experience so you're building your profile. I find that clinicians that kind of do clinical medicine for years on end, and then they kind of decide one day they would do non-clinical work, but they've not had the basis of it. You're not going to be as competitive those that have already built it and thought about it and already had that narrative from the get-go. And making sure you relate everything back to what your career goal is very, very important, because you're selling your profile is essentially what happens in interviews, because they're going to ask you, how do you get from A to Z, etc., etc. So really kind of giving yourself a clear narrative about how you're going to, pitch yourself. And in my humble opinion, I feel being able to pitch yourself is hugely important, because there's a lot of jobs that obviously like not been advertised. There's a lot of jobs that get created. So if you feel like there's a role that you want to go for and you feel like you would be good at, it's good to kind of reach out or network with people to kind of see if they have that opportunity available. And creating opportunities for yourself is also a skill, because then that way it is a win-win situation. The organization benefits and you also benefit because you're doing something that you like. But that comes from skill development. So knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're competent at, knowing what you're interested in. I think authenticity is absolutely key, being authentic to yourself. I think a lot of people, especially in clinical medicine, I see a lot of newly qualified doctors and senior medical students just do things for the sake of doing it. You really need to ask yourself why you're doing these things. Like, how does it relate to your overall story? If you can't articulate a clear story, people are not going to be convinced. And if you're not able to convince others about why you're fit for a particular role, then how are you going to get them? How are you going to get to where you want to be? So it's very important to be clear on your narrative and being certain about what you want. Because I think for some people, it's more about kind of balancing work-life balance. For some people, it's taking the pressure of clinical work to do something else, so that you're not taking on the cognitive load of what the stresses of clinical medicine. And I've seen it with my own father, where the cognitive load is so high that I think he would have perhaps benefited doing a non-clinical role. But obviously, when you're so far into a practice and you don't have time to go away from it, it takes time. And then life hits you, you have children, you have a family, you have a partner, etc., etc. These are things I think people don't realize, that you need to start early to be able to provide yourself opportunities, which are a bit more easier to get later on in life.
And there's a challenge if I think of some of the senior doctors that I talk to, and they sort of say, well, I want to do something that's more leadership related or transformation related, service improvement related. And the reality is that perhaps people have it in their mind, I'm going to be director of transformation. And you kind of think, well, okay, yes, you might be a 50-year-old consultant, but you're not going to be a director of transformation because that person's
Yeah.
worked in transformation for 20 years.
Yeah, because they'll ask you, what projects have you done that's enabled to, where is your proven track record? How have you built your track record? And that is what in essence, what I'm building, so that when I do get to that point, similar to the case that I can demonstrate very clearly how I've demonstrated X, Y, Z, and that is going to enable me to get into leadership positions when I want them.
So there'll be people listening to say, well, okay, that's all very well, but like, I have where do I even start? How do I network? How do I create my story?
Sure.
Sort of how do I create opportunities? How do where are these people? So let's sort of say, I don't know, there's a 25, 30, 35-year-old listening who says, yeah, you know what, I'd love to do sort of something that's more leadership related, and kind of thinking, I don't even know where to start. What would you say to them?
So I'm a huge fan of getting involved in community. So, for example, the Healthcare Leadership Academy has a great community. So, networking with other doctors, healthcare professionals, and seeing what they're doing and understanding their journeys and getting their mentorship and coaching is going to be hugely important in, being able for them to kind of, provide you what worked for them, because not everything's going to work for you, because your goals are going to be different to everybody else's. So, really understanding community. So, finding people that are like-minded. If you want to go into the entrepreneurship space, there's a lot of entrepreneurship kind of communities out there, especially in London, especially in Amsterdam, Paris, the big cities as well. So being able to kind of understand like-minded individuals and be able to kind of engage in that dialogue. I think the world is far more globalized now. So with a lot of online communities is hugely important. Optimizing your LinkedIn page, I think a lot of clinicians and doctors shouldn't be afraid of LinkedIn, being able to kind of use it as a tool rather than it as seeing as like a humble brag. It's not about your achievements, it's actually more of a networking kind of tool. I mean, I get DMs from many companies all the time. And sometimes, even if you may not be a fit for a role, you may know somebody else. And that's how the world works in terms of actually acquiring a job that's a role that's going to be paid and that's going to be valuable to you. Being sure about what you want. What does your life look like? So I had some good advice from a friend of mine that said, when you're a consultant, what would your week look like? Would you want to do private work? Would you want to just do NHS work? Like, what does it look like? How many days would you set aside? And that essentially is your job plan for what you would pitch to for the consultant role. So understanding that about what your life is going to be looking like, and that way you can really position what kind of opportunities would be fit. But for me, I think for a lot of people of that age range, they lack a lot of skill development. So they don't understand what a lot of non-clinical work looks like on quite a very instrumental level. Not your roles that just look good on paper, but actual roles that actually are going to showcase what you've achieved with what your output is. What I have noticed is clinical medicine, although you're obviously going to you do your shift or your day-to-day clinical work, it's not necessarily an output that you like showcase. It's not something, a project that you present with results, and that takes a lot of teamwork where you're actually actively working with the team, working towards a common goal. So although that is illustrated in medicine, it's not similar in the aspect of like project work. So being you can obviously do this in a clinical basis, project based, with service improvement, etc., but they require like commitment. So being able to actually commit to these like projects and being able to showcase actual results is hugely important. So I'm not saying like clinical medicine is completely like this, but it's a different skill set in its own right. You need to be able to kind of be able to implement good project management skills. And like at the Healthcare Leadership Academy and MEX Academy, we have a lot of programs that offer this. So this is why I was very interested, because it helped me understand like how this works practically and how it's implemented. But yeah, that's how I would kind of position it at.
There's something there about whatever you're doing is creating evidence and looking for opportunities and building your portfolio, and there's elements of that most people can do in their jobs or on the peripheries of the
Yeah.
job. People can build portfolios and collect evidence, knowing where they want to be in 10 years' time. But I'm interested also, in this balance between waiting for something to come along, waiting for a role to come along that you're going to apply
Yeah.
to, and you may or you may not get it, versus, you said, go out there, create your own opportunities.
Yeah.
That to me, that's a fundamentally a different mindset.
Yeah.
It's a
Yes.
mindset that says, I'm going to scroll through, I'm going to look at jobs, I'm going to apply for the jobs that are going, versus I'm going to go out there and I'm going to create opportunities and create jobs for myself.
Yeah. Exactly. But that comes down to good networking, knowing where you doing a proper really understanding where the need is and then fulfilling that need. And that's where you kind of pitch yourself or promote yourself for that particular role that you think is necessary. But this comes back down to really good networking and knowing people and getting to know what people need. But as you get better at it, you'll find it becomes very obvious about where you could see an opportunity. But you need to have that opportunity mindset. So thinking that I'm going to create my own opportunities and therefore see more lucky in that respect. But things change, and obviously you need to be in line with your own values and not let life come at you, because life comes from you, not at you. And that's the biggest mindset change I had, was when I realized that once life comes from me, you create your own story rather than life coming at you, where you're kind of the decisions are made for you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. And there's something also there for me about flexibility,
Yeah.
as in, I'm not okay. This may be where I want to be, but there's lots of ways that I can get there. But it's not about us two networking and me trying to sell you or pitch you my idea, which you
Yeah.
may or may not want. But then what you said, networking, then is it's a conversation. It's me listening, and then you tell me what's going on for you.
Yeah.
I'm being flexible and thinking, what have I got that I can solve the problem for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you get to the really niche projects that you really are passionate about. That's where you get to do the things that you really want to do. And that passion, I think, for a lot of doctors and healthcare professionals is pretty much an A, because you have to, you have to have that passion to get through medical school and through all the studies and training that you do go through.
Why do some people struggle with networking?
If I'm being brutally honest, I think the medical admissions process is so tough. And I think every medic, every doctor will speak of this. I think you've already proven yourself to the medical schools, and you're going to become a doctor, or you are a doctor. How much more do I have to prove myself? And I think that's that attitude. And that reigns hard in our profession. And I feel it. And it's not, you need to remember, we may be okay in our field, but we are seen as very much not competent enough into the rest of the non-clinical world. We need to still prove ourselves to that world as well. And we do have the skills. For example, you can go from medicine into banking. Yes, of course you can, but you still have to have that development in your first year to be able to get those skills, so you are able to do the work that's required of you. So I think being a bit more open-minded as well about what opportunities out there, and realizing that you could be something else in a different setting is a good mindset to have. And that's what I think a lot of clinicians and doctors and surgeons and a lot of the healthcare professionals struggle, is because I've already proven myself. Why do I need to prove myself again? And that, I think, is the attitude that is very much gives us this air of we're entitled. And medicine's a very privileged position to be in, where you've got a guaranteed job in, if for the most part. It is only a clinical job, only clinical professionals can go for clinical professional jobs, right? So a doctor can only go for a doctor's job. You're not fighting against with all the bankers and all the lawyers for your job. Only doctors can go for doctor jobs. Doctors can go for banking jobs, but not the other way around. So there is like a skill thing, and I don't know if it's a sense of like entitlement. I wonder if it is, but I think you can't have both. You have to demonstrate competency in non-clinical roles to be given a non-clinical role and be taken seriously. So that's what I've been trying to make sure that I cultivate, so that I'm in a position where I can do both competently.
So there's something there. I'm thinking if I'm thinking of two extremes. Yes. So on one extreme is that, I've done it, they should be so lucky to have me. I've got all of these skills. I can't believe that they don't recognize it. I've got a huge ego and I can't believe that nobody else can see how brilliant I am, sort of,
Yeah,
which is a problem. Or, on the other hand, there's going to be a problem that says, I don't have anything to offer, so I might as well not bother because it's all too difficult.
yeah,
Anything to offer. But the reality is, what you've outlined is you've got lots to offer, but you've also got lots to learn. And the
yeah,
sweet spot is that the sweet spot is being very clear what you've got to offer, what you're good at, what
yeah.
your track record is, but then also developing the bits that you need to develop, and being clever in terms of how you repackage what you have to offer in a way that's
Yes,
to
yes.
support. Yeah.
And it's very I didn't realize this was the problem until I was successful to get into the roles that I have gotten into. But I think it's been a journey for me as well. So I've also learned that what works for me and what doesn't. If something's not in line with what I want, I don't go for it. Even if I'm offered it on a plate, I don't take everything. It has to align with my story and narrative, because if you're not sincere to that, you're not going to be able to justify it to the next thing that you do, because they're always going to ask you, well, how does this fit to your overall goal? And I think a lot of people appear impressive, but actually they can't really articulate why they've done XYZ. And actually people will need to understand that about you for you to be successful in the roles that you're going for.
Yeah. Okay. I'll bring us to a close, Sharmi, if that's okay. I wonder if I could get you to summarize, what would be your top tip? Does it work?
My top tips are: keep open-minded, network as much as you can. You never know what value someone's going to bring to you and what value you're going to bring to them. Be be strategic in the way that you go for things if you are going for roles, and always look at the value of what you've already done and what you want to learn for your next role, or anything that you want to do. And nothing is impossible. Everything is possible. It's just you may need to take a different strategy to get there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you.